All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour. The American Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has put up a poll on social media site X, asking people to vote about a possible name change. The Secretary of Defense has asked people if it was okay to rename the Department of Defense to Department of War, with a hashtag People's Pentagon. About 140,000 people have voted so far, with almost 54% of the people saying that the name of the department should be changed to Department of War, while the rest of the 46% were happy with the existing name, Department of Defense. Now, this comes after the Secretary of Defense met with the Doge chief and the world's richest man, Elon Musk, at the Pentagon. Media reports have suggested that Elon Musk was briefed about a possible war with China. But later, the Defense Secretary cleared the air, saying that the meeting with Elon Musk was all about efficiency at the government offices and innovation, and not about a possible war with China.
Elon Musk is an innovator. Elon Musk provides a lot of capabilities our government and our military rely on, and I'm grateful for that. We welcomed him today to the Pentagon to talk about Doge, to talk about efficiencies, to talk about innovations. It was a great informal conversation. The rest of that reporting was fake. There was no war plans, there was no Chinese war plans, there was no secret plans. That's not what we were doing at the Pentagon.
All right, so that is what Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, has to say now. And to give us more perspective on this, we're joined by Mr. Glenn Carl, who's a former national intelligence officer from the CIA and the national security and foreign policy expert. Mr. Carl, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. Now, there was a lot of speculation about Elon Musk's visit to Pentagon. In fact, there were articles written in American media which indicated that possibly Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, could be briefing Elon Musk about the possibility of a war with China. But Pete Hegseth, of course, came out and rubbished that. But in your assessment, the fact that even such a talk and such speculation was ongoing about this meeting of Elon Musk with Pete Hegseth, what's your understanding of this?
Well, I think that since we have amateur hour really in the leadership of the government now, the reports that Musk was going to receive a briefing that included information about war plans is probably, I'm sure that's accurate. I think the sources were numerous and verified by multiple news agencies. The backlash was that he has no right to know anything like that, no competence. The motivation for the briefing was this push for efficiency, and everyone has ideas on what would be efficient or not. And I don't doubt that some of his thoughts on how to cut costs are, in the narrow sense, rational, but they are based on zero understanding of how the Defense Department works, how the government has to work, and various substantive factors that lead to compromises and decisions that, from an outside perspective, are economically less efficient than they might be. So it's good that he wasn't briefed. It's not surprising that he was going to be briefed, and it's clowns undermining frankly, the efficiency of the government while saving a few dollars.
It's almost difficult to imagine, although it's not beyond the realm of possibility, that there could be talk of about a possible war with China. But what is your take on Pete Hegseth putting out this poll on X of renaming the Department of Defense to a Department of War? It's almost bizarre to, in fact, have a ministry called the Department of War.
Well, two things. Where even to begin? It's not a surprise at all. In fact, it's a sign of competence that the Defense Department have contingency plans for a war with the principal strategic challenge, and not to say adversary necessarily, and power on Earth, other than the United States. That's normal. There was a flap, kerfuffle 30 years ago or so, I guess, when it came out. An historian was doing archival research, as I recall, and found that the United States had plans to invade Canada. And of course, the Canadians, understandably, were all angry about this. But I think every military in the world, if they are remotely competent, will do contingency planning for as many possibilities as one can come up with. So that
Right.
there be such plans should actually reassure everybody that there's some level of competence in the Defense Department and the United States military and government. Now, as to the poll, this is just classic pandering to the public. It's a terrible idea for any government to run itself through a popular, informal referendum on a given issue. It's not surprising that essentially half are in favor and half are opposed, 54 to 46%. It's an utterly meaningless thing, which might take some substance if it is acted upon. But to look to 330 million people to have informed opinions on any complicated subject is doing them a disservice. Now, the history of the Department of War and the Department of Defense, all military establishments were called the Department of War, Ministry of War, until after World War II. It was 1949, I believe, that President Truman changed the name of the Department of War to the Department of Defense on the conviction, which is reasonable, that saying Department of War implied an aggressive intent. And the world, having gone through the worst cataclysm in its modern history, thought, well, preparing defense is reasonable, but preparing war is something no one really wants to do. So let's call it the Department of Defense. Now, Hegseth and the Republicans will say, well, let's just say Department of War because we want war fighters and so on. Well, fine. To ask the public, as I say, I think is foolish. I'm not opposed to democracy, don't get me wrong. I'm opposed to the referendum approach to making any significant government decision. It leads to populism and to propaganda and to ill-informed decisions, because you can't expect an average person to understand the ins and outs of complicated subjects that he doesn't or she doesn't work on. So I think it's foolish, but it's politically probably astute.
All right, very interesting. Thank you very much, Mr. Glenn Carl, for joining us with our perspective there. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.